controversial, we'll go into something more controversial. That
Yes.
is perfect and imperfect data. So I think the first question from my end, Joe, is perfect data is clearly, good. If it were easy to achieve, there's nothing bad about it, and perfect data is better for sure than imperfect data. But it can also have negative parts to it. So I'm interested in starting by going into that and starting to frame that dichotomy. So, yeah, why do you think striving for perfect data can sometimes be bad and paralyze a finance team? And do you have an example from your time at Livestro where chasing that perfect data actually held you back?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to start out, super cliche, right? Everyone knows the phrase analysis paralysis. Um, I'm sure I'm not the only one to say that they're guilty of finding themselves in that. I feel like I found myself in that yesterday and something I was working on, right? Um, but it's important to find that balance of how much analysis is too much, whereas when can you draw the line and understand, okay, I have what I need to make the strategic decision to move forward or to place that in front of the team to come to a broader consensus. And so striving for that perfect data can definitely slow you down. I'd say you should always be striving to have that cleaner and great foundation of data. But going too far into it at times can definitely slow you down and hold you back.
While I keep going, we have our first quiz of on a scale of 1 to 10, how perfect do you think your data is? So I'm gonna answer for myself. I'm gonna give myself host and panelists cannot vote. I was gonna give myself a 6, but like we'll see. So I
Yeah.
think I think it makes sense. And do you have an example like Joe of like something that you've done in the past where you found yourself stopping and saying, wait a minute, this
Yeah.
is great. I want it to be perfect, but I might be past the point.
Yeah, absolutely. In thinking about this, one situation that popped up into my mind was just analyzing the profitability of a specific region or channel for us. So a little background, LifeStraw, we're in the consumer product space. We sell water filters, whether it's in the outdoor or home space, and we're a global company. So we operate in the US, we have sales in Europe, and really just trying to identify where we're profitable and not. And identifying a specific region in Europe, for example, our leadership team wanted to understand if it makes the most sense to continue to push resources into that, and just understand the overall profitability. And through that analysis, led down a deep rabbit hole road of like, okay, are we capturing all the data costs of like shipment costs at an order level or warehousing costs, those getting allocated properly to the appropriate business and so forth. And so that was one of the experiences that came to mind where I felt like, okay, looking at the data from a high level, I knew where this was going, but the decision making got prolonged probably a bit longer than it needed to, just based on the additional asks of data clarity, which maybe at the end of the day will help validate a decision. But if we're trying to move efficiently and operate to the best of our ability, I think the markers were there early on to tell us, okay, this is the decision we need to go move forward with.
And I think we'll get later on how to align other stakeholders, because I think there's something interesting in what you mentioned, Joe. Of one thing is maybe even if you have perfect data, it's different from others, your executive team, management, perceiving that that data is perfect, which could
Yes.
be two different things. But let's park that for a second, and I think how do you know that enough is enough? And I think like adding an example from my end, for me, one of the techniques that I have in some way is almost seeing how data changes, in different iterations. So, I'm doing the profitability analysis for a given region. It's, profit margins are 5%. If I go, do a lot of data cleaning, go back, and now it's 4.9, I'm like, okay, maybe I can keep going, but this sounds pretty stable. If I go clean up data and then I go back and now it's like -2% and the answer changed directionally, I'm like, okay, maybe it is worth it to keep going. Does that resonate? Do you use like similar techniques, or what's your gut for when is it enough, and when you have the right data?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, it starts with, and honestly, Adam and I kind of talked a little bit about this as well, was first understanding the business critical metrics to your business, right? For us at LifeStraw, a lot of that's going to be around just pure profitability and making sure that we're operating efficiently, and how that ties into our treasury side, our cash forecast, which I have plenty of examples to talk about. So understanding what's the mission critical points. And then for me, in thinking about this, I think about two larger buckets in terms of data quality. What's the materiality of the decision? That obviously uh, factors into how much attention you're going to give a certain data set, as well as the volatility. And so you can have things that are large materiality, but the volatility isn't too crazy, versus something else where that can swing the entire conversation. Like you just said, maybe there was an input to that data that swings it from a positive to a negative, and changes the entire scenario. So, from a high level, those are the two things I like to think about first, and then attack it from that point of view.
So what you're saying is, high materiality, high volatility is of course the one where spending more time makes a lot of sense. You should spend your efforts there,
Yes.
and it might make an impact. High materiality, low volatility, you want to make sure to your checks, but in the end it like won't change much. And then maybe it's like, yeah, okay. So I think that's your 2 by 2 in some way, which of course, as an ex-consultant, I always appreciate a good 2 by 2
Yeah.
matrix to help make decisions. You mentioned you had an example on the cash forecast. How would you apply that matrix to that example?
Yeah. Um, Something very top of mind. We have our board meeting coming up next week, and so our team regularly refreshes our cash forecasts, make sure we're on top of what we're operating with, and in a healthy position to continue to grow our business. And so, in thinking about the data that feeds that model, which is coming from many different data sources, um, I like to split it into two. We have our receipt side, the money coming in, and for that, the two examples for me were, okay, we have our smaller customers, non-material. We can lean on probably our receivable aging from our ERP for that forecast, but we have, let's say, Amazon makes up probably over 50% of our revenue, and in order to make that a little tighter and cleaner, we're going to link directly to their payable forecast out of their system, right? So, ideally our ERP aligns with their payable forecast, but they will have the exact dates that they have cleared and submitted that they're gonna um,
Mhm.
pay out on. So that's identifying kind of two forms of materiality. And then as far as volatility on the disbursement side, we like to bucketize our disbursements kind of into like general operating expenditures, which really won't be too volatile month over month. We can look at our payroll, we can look at our admin and other expenses. But then also on the disbursement side, we have a very volatile production forecast where
Mm.
our cash layout for procuring raw materials or inventory swings month over month by a large amount. And so it is very important for us to dial in that side of the forecast. Whereas the general OPEX side, we can kind of lean on a broader assumption.
So one of the things that's interesting, and I wanted to dig a little bit deeper, on the Amazon side, on the payables, you talked about connecting directly to their systems. I
Hmm.
know that part of that you do via LF. We don't need to talk about that now. We can talk about that later. But it is one of the ways that I think about you can solve this problem of data, that is with systems and technology. And I think there's
Hmm.
a lot of tool. Again, LF is one tool of many that you can use as part of your stack to get better at it. For the raw materials, because like, do you have the similar technique, and do you also solve it with technology, or how do you go about increasing precision there with the volatility that it has?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one we are actively trying to address that challenge. Um, like you said, there's great tools out there. Obviously, a left top of mind here. that help us increase our data cleanliness by just linking directly with ease. When data like that isn't necessarily available from a portal or a system like Amazon's with our supplier, if they're not able to give us direct visibility to um, what their production plan is for us to be able to procure, that's where the difficulty comes in. That's where a lot of the outside of the world of IT comes in, right? You have to have the business relationships and the
Mm,
meetings to understand with those key partners. But ideally for us, there's a solution down the road that helps us dial that in, and would love for it to be as easy as the receivable side.
nice. Maybe there's something we can do as a left, so we
Yeah,
can take it offline and see
yeah, we'll
if
take it offline.
we can also solve it. But I do think that that highlights one of the things that I strongly believe in. That is, yes, chasing perfect data for as a goal itself is bad, but sometimes you have high materiality, high volatility. It is important, and this is one that the we have a few of the LF team members here watching, and they know that I feel strongly about it. Where sometimes you need to do data entry, and sometimes the best way is you need to go line by line, be it transaction from your ERP, be it from any data source, and just need to put your music on, put your headphones, and just go through the data. And again, sometimes it's very worth it, and it's the difference between a right or a wrong decision. Does it resonate as well with some of these?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Adam mentioned I joined LifeStraw 5 years ago. I was the first finance hire here. We quickly built out our team, but we demerged from our parent company in Switzerland, and with that came with their data dump from their ERP to a new ERP for us and NetSuite that we set up. And so the data cleanup and those tedious projects were inevitable and highly important to ensure that we start off on a strong foot and continue to grow that strong foundation of data for us to be able to grow our business on. And so prioritizing those is necessary, even though they're tedious. It's important, I think, to loop in whatever other team members within the business just to help them understand the importance and priority of that data feeding strategic decisions down the road, especially if they are ones that are inputting key metrics to that. So something we are not that's not new to us over here on the LifeStress side, and obviously we're trying to keep those projects down to a minimum as we grow, but they are inevitable.
Yeah, it makes sense. And there's a good discussion that we could have over AI taking our jobs, and 5 years from now, this webinar being my agent, your agent talking. If there's one thing that I'm not sad is AI potentially taking those projects out
Yeah,
of our hands and doing
yeah,
it for us. And we have a few interesting things coming on the left side and for that, which is good. Uh,
very cool.
so I think we talked about very granular data, very granular details. There is like that tension between detail is good. Detail can also add complexity. And I think that it happens for us. And in my consulting days, I remember inheriting models from the clients. Aleph's clients do the perfect models, so never an Aleph client.
Yeah.
But my consulting clients did have, and I was like, this mess of a model of what is this doing? Oh yeah, it's calculating gross margin, and isn't that just a division? And then you have these errors that are hidden in tons of complexity that sometimes are not necessary. So how do you balance that tension between, in your case, you want SKU level detail, and that's very important, but you want to keep your models lean and simple and easy to use?
Yeah, for sure. Especially coming from the consumer product space, and you talk about SKUs, you can work at a company. Prior to LifeStraw, I worked at Stanley Black and Decker, Fortune 500 company. They have probably close to 100,000
Mm.
SKUs. Over the years, I remember those models running there. We would click a button on our Excel and walk away for lunch and come back. I'm sure a lot of people have done that before. Uh, But LifeStraw too, we have our complexities. The SKU list is a lot smaller, but that doesn't mean that it's not just as complex. And so probably a best practice that a lot of people within the space already leverage is just some form of hierarchy and organization to help communicate that data point efficiently and more consistently. And so if we're talking about SKUs, right, that would be grouping them into a product group or a class based on size. Or if we're talking about even just sections of the P&L statement, grouping lumps of accounts into a higher parent level. And then for me to reduce that conversation of trying to drag everyone into the weeds, I like to approach meetings with closer to the highest level possible, right? Enter that meeting with in your pocket the data available to be able to drill into those questions if someone has a question on a specific number. But you can let those questions come to you, and maybe those questions ultimately lead you to iterate your model and presentation down to that next level without going too deep. And so for me, keeping those high level hierarchies keeps things organized and efficient.
So you like the idea is you have the granular level detail, but you only tap into it when you need it, and you try as much as possible to keep things high level when possible. Is that a good way of saying it back to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even grouping at that hierarchy level doesn't lose visibility to a potential error. Um, I think that's the most important part. Maybe if you stay too high level, it would, but finding that sweet spot, and normally again that's teased out by the questions that come through after reporting, ultimately gets you kind of to that good final state.
I have a side comment. I'm no internally Joe for having a short attention span. So I find something interesting, I go something else. So what's your favorite LiveStro SKU?
Oh, favorite SKU. Uh, the quick answer probably would just be the one that immediately pops into my head, which is our cash cow. It's the I can say it off the top of my head. It's the LSPHF 010 or the 038, depending on the packaging. It's
Sure.
our if anyone knows our company, it's the original life straw. If you look us up, the utility straw to drink out of rivers, streams, if you're out and about backpacking and hiking. But it's been a hero product of ours for years, and a testament to that is that I can say the SKU name off the top of my head.
Yeah, for sure. The team sometimes tests me where I can say the Aleph hex code of the Aleph blue. So I feel it's kind of something
Oh,
similar,
that's
right? Of
nice.
like being able to do that. It means that you have spent time, looking at profitability for that SKU probably.
Yes,
Uh,
for sure.
Makes sense. And can on that idea of data quality, do you have an example of data quality issue that immediately raised an alarm and you're like, hey, we must fix this immediately, and it's something that we might address. And I think it will get to do with, of course, the materiality and variability that you were covering. But yeah, I wonder if you had any, like I think everyone we had the votes here. I think the highest ranking on how happy you are with your data has been an 8.
Okay.
I think if you're the one giving the 8, you should come here and be a panelist with us, because I feel like I would vote myself lower than an 8. So kudos if that was you, but I think like everyone will here have like horror stories of you know typos or things allocated to the wrong department or the wrong country. Yeah, do you have any horror story or anything that you saw that you need to fix immediately?
Yeah. So thinking about this question, the first thing that jumps to mind again goes back to that assessment of materiality and volatility. Um, and so we have checks within our business. Obviously, within reporting, we're always bouncing up against what our plan was. And if something looks off, we'll go ahead and say, okay, well, either our actual data is way off or our model is off. And one of those checks, a lot of checks that happen within our business, is just within the operations team. We're always trying to monitor, okay, what are our landed costs looking like? How are container rates trending? How is that going to impact our margins on our product level? How does that impact our channel mix margins? And so a data, I would say, error that we immediately identified and had to jump on was a bit twofold. It was one, first, data availability. So making sure that our team was properly entering landed cost onto inbound containers that affects our inventory value. And so immediately identifying after a period of time, okay, we've let the ball slip on a few shipments here or there, et cetera. Maybe one or two is not the end of the world if we have a large historical base to reference off of. But if that's a repeating problem, that's going to mess up our margins, our account reconciliations on the balance sheet side down the road. So that was something that we had to nip in the bud right away. And yeah, again, as far as materiality, maybe that one shipment doesn't affect it, but the data set could become compromised if that were to be allowed to go on forward, and then we wouldn't be able to strategically plan forward looking using that data. And so now that we have checks and processes in place, we can say, okay, we feel confident that based on our container rates, the landed cost of our hero SKU is X% over our purchase price. If we forecast a decrease in purchase price in tandem with this landed cost rate down the road, what does that look like for our margins and so forth?
Nice. And I think you're touching a bit into something that I think is like very interesting and it's like important in this, that is the fixing data all at once is very hard, but then making it a daily habit and like a consistent habit and keeping data clean is a little bit easier. So the more that you can have systems like that in place, where the sooner you have some deviation, you take action, you correct it, and you go back to normal, the better. And then whenever, and this is where like the horror stories, and this goes back to my consulting days of my first project, we're analyzing profitability of an oil and gas company. Their data practices were, if I think we have areas of opportunity, that company was areas of opportunities times 10, 15 years of bad practices accumulating. And this was in the pre-AI world. So my role as an analyst was go line by line through, I think it was something like 50,000 lines of cost to, do an oil and gas well, and just classify that in different categories. And it's like, yeah, one better system, like 10 years ago, would have saved me probably like 4 or 5 weeks. And consulting rates are not cheap,
Yeah,
so it would have saved them a lot of money, probably.
for sure.
uh all right. And I think let's go a little bit into your, Adam was making like a question there around like number of data sources. And I think like the winning answer was this idea of, hey, I have 5 or plus data sources. And I think
Hmm.
in your case, you have something similar, right? Where you have like NetSuite, you have Shopify, you have Amazon. So there's a lot about combining data and ensuring consistency across systems. Can you talk about some of the unique challenges that come from that?
Yeah, for sure. So you landed on the three big ones that we're currently leveraging with Aleph, NetSuite being our ERP, directly into Amazon to leverage their sell-through data, and then Shopify. We are a largely e-commerce company. We have our direct consumer business that we run through Shopify. So for us, those three data points are really key for driving a lot of decisions, right? Without getting too deep into pulling in a number of other data sets. And those inherently, again, being in the CPG space, we're focused on sell-through metrics, trying to identify trends with on how profits are or products are selling, customer reaction to promotional deals that are run, as well as accurately attributing like that promotional spend to customers, products, and so forth, so that we can have the margin analysis in-house. So the challenges that come there inherently are marrying the data. right? The sell-through that comes through Shopify, different format from what comes through Amazon. We actually also receive for all of our other brick and mortar retailers. So having to go into each of those systems individually and pull manually, obviously not ideal. Leaves room for plenty of errors, whether it's just data input or output. And then just the pure organization itself, right? They're all going to come out in different formats. And so that's a big challenge for us that luckily we felt a good bit of relief over the past 2 years since we met you guys. Throwing a left kind of in the middle there between us and those systems, and just setting up that kind of wall of like, all right, any data that passes through a left has to go through this data cleanup, mapping, aligning headers, and so forth, has really helped us speed up our ability to analyze the data instead of trying to throw it together.
It's crazy how I feel we are, as a society, closer to AGI than to be able to solve, different data coming from like two or three systems at the same time. And but yeah, and again, I think of course that's a problem that we can solve, and I'm happy to hear that we solved it for you. I think there's a lot of learnings, even for those of you out there that are not LF users yet. And I think it's that idea, right, of investing time ahead of time, doing the appropriate mappings, and like make sure that you are in the trade-off of sometimes you're spending time and like chasing perfect data for nothing. I think that idea of making sure that the different data sources align in structure and do the necessary mappings feels like one where it is definitely worth it and it does pay tenfold.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, kind of goes to the saying of like, do it once, do it right. It might be a big lift, um, but the reward is that not only do you gain bandwidth, do you gain time, efficiencies, but then you also gain the confidence in that data. And we're here talking about all data being imperfect, but it is always a constant strive to make it as perfect as possible. It's just kind of identifying when to flex your brain to put in the work to make that happen versus when you feel like you have enough to make those strategic decisions.
you mentioned NetSuite, and you mentioned earlier about that it wasn't what you had when you inherited and we started at Livestro. I think ERP migrations is probably a source of nightmare that many in the audience can, think about and like will have very top of mind. I think Anna mentioned that you have a few good thoughts on, yeah, like data switching and tagging, and like what was your take to make that process a bit more efficient without, compromising the data integrity?
Yeah, I will say it wasn't easy. um, Taking all that information from the parent company, and then for myself, it was a new ERP, so I was learning NetSuite at the same time. So we were implementing, migrating all at the same time. Um, I could probably give some notes on hindsight, and just thinking about how I would have done things differently, leverage the data differently to drive decision making in how we set up our ERP. Kind of going back to that landed cost scenario, right? Uh, Parent company passes over a balance sheet that has an accrued balance for what we plan to get billed by certain vendors for logistics. Okay, in my mind at that time, that doesn't map directly to a workflow within our ERP. But now I understand, okay, all that accrued balance is going to tie to the bills that we want to add onto our inventory when they come in. And so at that time, it was difficult to understand what data was available to me and how I could kind of leverage it to build our ERP. But that's not to say that since the 5 years ago to today, we haven't continuously again iterated, tried to uh, take our learnings and customize our ERP a bit more to fit our needs as far as reporting and analysis.
And you touched on one thing that I wanted to make a comment on, because I think it's funny even for us as a company, there's a lot of data in the ERP that you might not even know exists. So I think there's something there that is very real. One of the benefits of LF, as you talked about, is We connect via API to different data sources. We pull almost like all of the data from the backend. We've had a lot of instances where people were surprised that, that column that they wanted to use a lot of the times to do a lot of analysis was actually there in their ERP. It was getting collected, it was tagged, and it was there. And it happens to us. We connect to HubSpot. We do a lot of our own analysis on sales using Aleph. And we have even team members being like, oh, we have this detail about this deal that we didn't even know that existed. So I think there's a lot there around like even investing time in knowing, and like sometimes the answer that you seek might be within you already, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, we definitely had that experience with you guys. I remember working with Augustine and the rest of the left team that helped us get implemented, which was very quick. But just building out like custom reports, it would be like, okay, well, here's a dump of all the data that would come from this data source. It's like, oh wow, okay, there's a lot of columns. Obviously, we don't need all of these, but there's a column that is valuable information that we weren't thinking about before, whether it's like a start or end ship date on a certain uh, order that we can now leverage into our order bank reporting to help forecast revenue. And so it's really opened up an easier way for us to pick and choose what data we're leaning on.
Yeah, yeah, and I think for me, the idea of sometimes the data can be overwhelming, so it should be much more like a surgeon type of approach where you need to think what you want for your analysis, and then you need to go and search it rather than get confused in the sea of data that might be available.
Yeah.
So I told you that we're gonna come back to this, but finance doesn't operate in a vacuum. It's not just you, it's you plus your data team, your ops team. Everyone is getting their hands on probably like Amazon and Shopify. NetSuite might be more your court and you might have more control over that. But there's other teams. How do you collaborate with them, and how can you, work together to help increase
Yeah.
data accuracy?
Yeah, there's absolutely a strong sense of data governance, of accountability. If everything were to fall onto our team's laps in terms of ownership with data, it would just be way too much. And that's beyond that. It's we're not the experts of those other fields, right? We want to lean on those experts, those people that are in the day to day, to make sure that they have the chance and opportunity to validate what's going into our systems and ultimately report it on. So, um, small team here, but we have, for example, our product team. They're all responsible for scrubbing, importing new SKUs, making sure dimensions are up to date and accurate based on builds, just to make sure, because all of that data, right, is used for logistics and identifying shipping costs when building out new models. We have our supply chain team, which I've talked about a lot, and the sourcing team responsible for inputting sourcing information, so purchase price from vendors, making sure that's up to date because that's ongoing negotiations with all of them, something that our team would not be able to stay on track of with everything else going on. So we lean on them. We give them our confidence that we're able to pull accurate POs with accurate PO rates and shipment dates and arrivals to help us build our financial forecast. So it's a group effort. Um, Everyone, I think, understands the importance and financial impact um, of all their inputs. Again, small team, so a lot of our brainstorming, decision making includes at least a representative from all parts of the business, and so inherently they're keen to how important it is that they're on top of their data and know that they are accountable for it.
And that made me think about, you have a lot of teams, a lot of complexity. This is something that we didn't discuss, so maybe you don't have an answer immediately, but what's the one thing that you wish you could fix about your data if you could wave a magic wand? What's the one thing that's still unsolved and gives you nightmares? Because I think that's something that will be very relatable, and I'm sure everyone in the audience will have their one thing that chases them.
Yeah, the one thing,
And
uh,
maybe you don't, Joe, and that's why we chose you, right? Like we chose you because you're one of the people with the cleanest data in our customer base. So maybe there's not one thing. Yeah.
no, I can't sit here and say that we don't have any issues. There's plenty of issues that come top of mind. For me, it would almost be the real time accuracy, and we kind of talked about this before. A lot of it kind of goes back to relationships with outside parties and the data you're able to get from them. So what's not an issue right now is the fact that we can get real time immediate data from Amazon, right, on the receivable side. But what is an issue that I alluded to is that like we don't have the most perfect visibility to what our suppliers are planning to produce and ultimately bill ship us within the month. So if we could have real time data into that, obviously that trickles down to all the financial cash outlay and other metrics that we're looking at. And so a higher level of confidence, efficiency, and just visibility to that is probably something that would be uh, the perfect magic wand at this point in time.
Yeah. So you basically need your suppliers to implement the LEF for them to have better data.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the quest, and it is we should talk about that offline as well.
yeah, that'd be easy
Uh,
enough.
we we talked about people that you collaborate with, but like early in the webinar, I was asking about there's a gap between having the perfect data and having executives think that you have perfect data, and there might be a gap between that. So how do you ensure executives trust the data, especially because I'm sure as a growing company, like as a team that you build from scratch, there have been instances in the past where you had messy data that of course hurt that's trust and like
Hmm.
introduce some questions. So yeah, how do you navigate that and make them happy and trust the numbers that you're putting out there?
Yeah, it's a funny thing to think about because I think it evolves over time. I do think trust is gained ultimately in proof and performance, and I think reflecting on what we've been able to do here, I feel like happy to say that our models currently still need improvement, but they have gotten us to a place where we've built that trust. But there was a time when everything was new and errors were prominent to tease out. So for me, if we're working on something new or if we have a data input that we're not super confident that the data is clean enough, I think it's most of the utmost importance to be transparent upfront and just level set and align with everyone of like, okay, guys, here we are. This is what we're looking at. Um, this input is coming from this data source, correct? We feel confident. This input, we don't have the best visibility. Here are our assumptions. And the assumptions, when you lay those out on the table, are most likely based on other sources of data, right? Maybe historicals, or you kind of try and triangulate to a point where you feel confident to put at least a baseline assumption. And then that gets everyone on the same page of like, okay, we feel comfortable with that assumption. Let's do a little scenario analysis of if we variate X% off of that, how does that affect our model? How does it affect our decision based on this? And so just being transparent upfront um, might not get them to believe that the data is clean, but we'll get them to understand what you're working with and that the limitations are there, but also outline the goal of like, okay, this is a project moving forward to get our data into a better place.
So being able to go a bit more into detail and almost like break down the number and say, hey, we're not relying on our sales being whatever they are. We're telling you, hey, these are the sales by region and the sales by SKU, and being able to go into the detail to make sure that the data is more consistent there when you have like less context or less confidence in some way.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
All right. I think I think we have a few more questions, but I want to start like doing one or two of the Q&A. So we have one that is a little bit like broader. That is, what would be the main three goals that you ask like the main three goals that you would ask from your FP&A team in terms of keeping clean data?
Three goals that I would ask my team in terms of keeping clean data.
Very, very open-ended, so you can like take it and apply it as you want. And it's maybe, yeah, where like specific things to focus on, or specific processes that, hey, doesn't matter how busy you are, this is one thing that like you cannot drop. Maybe it's doing that profitability analysis by SKU and making sure that you have that monthly cadence and reliable data.
Yeah, so in thinking about this in our team, like most other FP&A teams, we have our structured month-end close process. Um, and with that comes our laundry list of items to get across the finish line to get our P&L into a place that we can report on. And so in terms of prioritizing and focusing, I like to direct our teams on kind of, again, going back to the material movers. And then that at least gives us a first touch base point where we can review our P&L and identify where there are any discrepancies. And then at that point, that gives me the direction to tell them, okay, we see a discrepancy here. Can you repull that data and make sure it looks accurate? Or it looks like we're missing a bill from this vendor. Can you reach out to them and make sure that we either have that accrued for or in the system? And so as far as goals, for me, it's biased towards the P&L on FP&A. Watching that gradually come into shape and identifying gaps that I'll send my team out to go look into further. After building up the P&L, then comes the next step of like further analysis, where we kind of find the transactions that are causing any variances that might drive data errors. And then the last goal, which would be something that is kind of tabled and turns into a project down the road when we have availability, is how can we improve that data input? And so if it's a shipping cost that's coming from our vendor, it's like, okay, well, do they give it? We have a bill for $10,000 for the month. Do they give it at an itemized level, where we can tell what customers it's going to help us with customer analysis? And if that's a possibility and availability, then that becomes a project and a goal down the road.
Nice. Which I think is another key element here of perfect data is a journey, not a destination, and
Yep.
it's something that you constantly improve on, and it's something that I talk with the team a lot in the context of data, but more broadly of course where we are today is very important, but having the systems in order to systematically improve and get better, every day, every week, every month is even more important, right? And I think the idea of thinking critically, identifying gaps, and solving compounds really, really strongly over time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because obviously speaking with you today, um, just digital transformation in our group has been a priority since I started, at least. I mean, taking all that data over from our parent company, implementing onto a new ERP, working in a highly complex industry that's very, very transactional, like the consumer product space, demands that. And so we're always looking at tools to help us be more efficient. I'm glad we've stumbled upon this tool that not only has made us more efficient, but makes me feel infinitely confident that we can grow and iterate with ease, because it's highly customizable. Anything that comes in our way, we know that we'll be able to puzzle piece it into what we're doing, with minimal effort. And so, yeah, that's a big part of our prior plans and stuff that we continue to plan to do.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words,
Yeah.
and it's been a pleasure. We have one more round. What advice would you give to someone who just started a new role? So to the Joe 5 years ago that just joined LiveStraw and is wrapping their head around, I have, 5 different data sources, nothing speaks with one another. I need to report to the board next week and like nothing matches with everything. Yeah, what would you tell, 2020 Joe, other
Yeah.
than the Eagles will win the 2025 Super Bowl and you will be very happy.
Yeah, I'd tell
Yeah,
myself that. Actually, no, I wouldn't tell myself that because I that would ruin the surprise.
yeah,
But yeah, it's funny. We've got some new team members in a house here, and I feel like I'm living through that right now, trying to teach them uh the whole data environment of LifeStraw. Right. And for me, it always starts at the ERP. And for me, I like to try to not, if you try to immediately go to the lowest level data sources, you'll get lost in the weeds. So I like to start at the highest level, right? So if I'm trying to teach someone that they need to, and they're trying to get a grasp on everything that lives within that data environment, go pick a super high level, whether it's a parent grouping of a list of chart of accounts or just like a revenue account. Drill into that account, start from the top. Okay, what transactions are hitting that account? Okay, we have invoices and we have cash sales. All right, those are two different transactions. What data feeds those transactions? And from there, you're able to kind of investigate your way through all the way down to the bottom line and understand what flows top to bottom and then what flows bottom to top. Obviously, it's a bit daunting when you have a lot of data systems and a lot of things feeding, but ideally, when you're able to clean up your data and get it into a nice organized way for it to come into your system, there's not too much to decipher. So, tip would be start top down, keep it high level, and then as you get more curious, you'll find yourself in those weeds, but you'll know where it leads to instead of trying to start bottoms up.
makes sense. Yeah, start from the answer, go backwards, not
Yes.
getting lost in the details whenever you
Yes.
need to. Uh, all right. We always try to end this like a couple minutes early because we know a lot of people will have 3 p.m., 3 o'clock. So
Sure.
my last question to you, Joe, is what's your favorite Aleph feature? We talked about a few.
Ooh.
It's always when I wanted to end with like one quick plug for Aleph and what's your favorite feature?
Yeah, this won't be one quick plug because there's been a couple plugs, but that I voluntarily thrown in. Have
Very,
you? So,
very, very
yeah.
casual,
Yeah.
Joe.
Um. Oh man, so many, so many good things. I mean, the actually, now that I think about it, easily the best for me is your push function and just the simplicity and the ease of using your existing models to create that database. And so for us, just quickly before Aleph, we had tried some other tools, but largely when I first started, I built from the ground up all of our forecasting and modeling in Excel, and it still lives there because Excel is flexible and comfortable, right? And so we had tried other tools where it almost felt like we were trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And it was like, all right, now I need to take my data and manipulate it into a way that'll fit into this system. Um, and a lot of that was basically literally just getting like our strategic plan into our system, our budget for the year, like trying to upload, oh, it won't take it because it's in the wrong format or something. It's like, all right, well, this is not efficient anymore. But for me now, we're able to iterate do different scenarios, make last second tweaks before board reporting, like that, just because we have our Excel templates and inputs set up. If we want to change an input, we do it in there, and then we click one button to push it back into Aleph to create this whole reporting consolidated scenario. And so for me, that has saved hours and hours of my time compared to Joe of 2020.
I won't endorse making changes 2 minutes before the board meeting. They might
Yes.
come, then we'll have like lawyers reach out, Joe. So we don't endorse this. You shouldn't do it. But if you do it, maybe you should do it with Alex.
Yeah. Make it
All
quick.
right, and yeah, thanks. I think like we have Adam here that is the to do the parting thoughts. But yeah, thanks a lot, Joe. Thanks a lot for taking the time, and it's been great as always.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Joe, we're gonna take a 5 minute intermission and then we'll pick up on the second hour. After this, if you're ready.
I'm gonna have to
Uh,
refill this bottle then.
Well, drinking water should not be a problem for you, so you're ready to go.
I know if
Everyone,
that was planted. That was great plug, Adam. Thank you. Like
Yes.
I know if that was planted and you guys prepared it, but it was very good.
it's all about timing.
Yep.
Yeah, and anyone that's still around, we appreciate. It's been great, Joe, especially like we love having you as a customer, and always great to hear your stories and use cases, and we could probably go for another hour. Afterwards, we'll send an email, we'll send the recording. If you're still here, want to watch it or share with your friends, and if you're not here, you don't hear this, but you can watch it on demand on the couch. And yeah, look forward to doing more of these in the future. But thank you, Joe, and thank you, Albert.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you both. Talk
Bye.
soon.
Cheers.